So moving on, Jeff, to the application process itself. And I know one aspect of consulting applications that people tend to really almost focus a lot of attention on and a lot of worry on is the dreaded case study. Could you expand on what case study questions are and what sort of questions that people might face?
Well, the case, especially for consulting, I think for many professional roles, it's being used more. Traditionally, it's been the management consultants firms and maybe the investment banking firms. And there's a bit of a cult or a bit of a small, I won't say the word elite, but a small group of people that really have understood them. I think that's a crime. In fact, so much so that I'm going to totally demystify that as much as possible going forward. And in fact, I did this post on the pyramid principle, which is an essential part of it that's on my site. The case interview, the reason it's so important is because it's like a mini apprenticeship. Too often, how you interview, getting a job is very different than doing the job. How many people that you know could do the job, but they don't interview very well? And so the thing about, and conversely, employers often ask these silly questions that don't necessarily indicate the person would be a good hire. You can spend a ton of money on all kinds of behavioral analyses, and some of those things are good. One way, especially in a project-based or consulting environment, is to conduct a case, because a case is a mini project. It runs you through many of the aspects of a consulting assignment, a project assignment. And there are two types. There's the structured case, which is the classic Harvard Business School. You have a company and you have all this detail around it and should they do and should they buy it or sell the division, or it's a financial aspect. It's structured, very much a business case. Then you have the unstructured ones. It could be how many ping pong balls could fit in a back of a semi truck. It could be should Apple buy Tesla. It could be, it's just, and then it's very ambiguous, and you say, right, go for it. And what's good about it is, now you could say, oh, I hate these, they're horrible, they're hard. Or you could say, they are hard, they will trip up 95% of the people taking them, but not me, because I'm going to figure out what to do. And that, once you demystify them, I think it's a huge advantage. And here are 3 or 4 of the things, maybe it's a few more than that. Again, this is a several-hour discussion, but I'll just give you the high points. 1, make sure you take a notebook in. Maybe it's a letter portfolio, which needs to be big enough that your resume can fit in there. Have blank pieces of paper. It's your secret weapon, because you don't have to do this all in your head. In fact, if you do, it'll probably count against you, because they don't want to just get the answer. They want to see the process. You ask if you can take notes. May I take notes? People will appreciate that, because 1, you didn't just jump into it. You asked permission. You open the book. And beforehand, write down the 3 or 4 frameworks that you might need to use. For example, a product family, a financial statement kind of thing. It could be organizational framework, or maybe decision prioritization. 3 or 4 that you may come across. So you don't have to have them in your head. You have a couple little notes to prime the pump. And the other thing that's important is ask questions. When someone says, what should the company do? Don't tell them. It's like a doctor. You didn't do any diagnosis. Ask the questions. Well, first of all, say, based upon what you're asking, this is the framework or 2 I will apply. You begin to ask the questions to make sure each part of your framework, you have the answers. Like, for example, if it's basic financial statements, you might say cost information in several areas. You might ask about revenue. You might ask about the products. For example, the 3 C's, company, the internal part, the competitors, and the customers. Very simple, but pretty effective. And then you go through, you get the information. Now, you just don't ask 100 questions, because questions take time. You don't have much time. Same as the real world. So you prioritize your questions. And then you get to a point, that's enough. Then you say, may I take a few minutes? You literally stop in the middle of the interview, and you spend some quiet time organizing your thoughts. That takes balls, or that takes, pardon the language, it takes some courage. And you know what? They'll appreciate that. And then you present some recommendations, and you get the feedback. If you simply do that, you've lapped 80% of the population, maybe 90%. Granted, there are some all-stars, but if you don't even know that, people just flop. They flounder. So those are some things I would recommend. And also, practice. Just rehearse, research and rehearse. You do those things, you will welcome. In fact, you will want case interviews. And you will try to convert any set of questions you get into a mini case because you want to demonstrate that. So I think it's a way to take something that can cause you pain or anxiety and turn it into a competitive weapon, because not enough people understand it, and the ones that demonstrate that will be head and shoulders above because you will have organized your thinking and you will have influenced, if not outright controlled, the direction of the interview.
That's brilliant advice, Jeff, and I wish I'd had an interview a few years ago for a small boutique strategy consulting firm, and it was just a early initial interview, and the recruiter said, "Oh, don't worry, there's no case studies." And then when I got through to the interview, they chucked in a cheeky little case study of how much does the average London black taxi make in an average night. And I wasn't expecting it, and I did everything that I shouldn't have done, and was like floundering about, and it was. If I'd followed your advice, I would have.
Oh my gosh!
A lot better.
When I first got exposed to this, I was worse than that. I mean, if you don't know what you don't know, you just hit a wall. It's not a pretty sight to see, because it's not like physically where someone gets injured on the field of play and you see it. And this is this invisible thing. It's like this invisible. So I remember one of the other aspects that's important. You just hit on it is, and I mentioned it's called unstructured, but another word is estimation. Be comfortable to estimate, even if you're wrong. You've got such power. You can make any kind of assumption. Take a hypothesis. So I think that people with a little bit of practice, they get this confidence because they can turn the tables and say, well, that London taxi has every 15 minutes has a new rider. There are 4 15-minute blocks in an hour, blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, you've gotten an answer. Are you right? Well, who's to say you're wrong? And if you are, you can dig into it. So I totally agree with you.
Is one more common than the other in terms of the structured or business focused?
For us, it's 50-50. I make it a point. Before I was doing this, we used to do either one, and then we'd have a behavioral interview, and I think that's wrong. I think there should be lots of cases. So we tend to give one of each to each person we interview, and we do a small behavioral at the beginning. Because it's amazing. Even a few weeks ago, it's a major university. I do several of these interviews. I've already been through 3-4 interview days myself. And people that succeed or thrive on the structured sometimes flounder with the unstructured. And the converse is true. And then you get the people that did well in both. So be ready for both, especially if you're going to a place that is more of a strategy consultancy. You may end up with 5 or 6 of these. And again, you aren't perfect. Sometimes the test is, how do you do when you stumble? Do you melt down? Or do you just redirect? Do you ask for help? We learn a lot about a person when things aren't going so well. They don't always develop character, but it reveals it, right? So I think that's the other thing. No matter what happens, you're solving a problem. In the real world, we make mistakes. And we just build on it. And I think showing that character as well is something that gives potential employers a lot of confidence, because that's the real world. And that's why case interviews properly done are actually good, because they give the interviewer a little more of a glimpse into the candidate than they might otherwise get through some trite questions about maybe behavioral and experiences.
No, I completely agree. And from the people you interview, I mean, and the ones that don't make it, what percentage fail due to the case study? Is it really a big hurdle compared to the other parts of the process?
Think about this as a gating mechanism, or a gate, where there are individuals who don't make it even to the interview. We have what's called a resume drop. So let's say there are 50 people that would like to interview for a position. We can only interview 8. or maybe we interview 16, whatever the number of teams we send out. So there are people without. So what I'm about to say is only for those people who have really good resumes and otherwise on paper really appear to be good. Maybe we've had a connection with an information session. So assuming the resume is good, grades are good, we've had some interaction with them, and otherwise they appear to be pretty good. The people that fall out, I would say it's more than 50% because of the case, maybe as high as 60 or 70, because it's a big deal for us.
Yep.
And then again, we're not just doing this because we blindly say a case is important, as much as we've set it up where we test for certain things, and those things are the same that we found for people to be successful in consulting. And remember, we've already tested or evaluated for many of the other things prior to the interview itself. Obviously, if it's grades or if somebody has no internship experience or for whatever reason their resume does not look like a fit, then that is a disqualifying characteristic. But post the interview process, we only invite people to interview, obviously, that have a chance. Otherwise, that wouldn't be a good use of their time or ours. Are
you able to give us a sneak peek of some of your more difficult unstructured questions?
I think that the best way to say it is the estimation problems get people, sometimes very intelligent people who are used to having a level of precision. I don't want to say they hide behind it, but we all live in a world where things are messy and not always certain, and yet some people deal with that by trying to exert control or assuming things are very specific. You laugh when you see the calculation on a report that goes out to 5 decimal points when you know there's no way it's even within around to the nearest 10. But yet people do that because they like the fact that Excel can go out that far, and they write it down. And so I think that's the biggest advice I would give for the unstructured ones is learn to estimate. And whether it's the number of cars going over a bridge in a certain day, whether it's the number of ping pong balls or jelly beans or whatever it is inside of some object, whatever the problem is, usually there's a time dimension, there's a money dimension, there's a units per dimension, units per unit of time. And so if you can separate those and do some estimation and just make it reasonable. If you're somewhere between the bounds of incredulity, unbelievableness, then I think you'll be fine. And that's the best way to approach it.
And say, for example, the example there of cars going over a bridge. Do you actually know the answer to these things, or is it just plucked out of?
Oh yeah.
It's not...
Well, what's interesting too is it's all in your assumptions. Like for example, there was traffic on bridges, and it depends on the number of lanes. It depends on how long the vehicle is. It depends on the speed. It depends on what percentage of commuters. There are a lot of these things. And you know what? There are multiple right answers. Because if you make the assumption, for example, about tourists, if you make the assumption about there is construction, if you make the assumption about time of day, sporting events, people can get real specific. It's amazing the number of different answers that you can get that are well thought out. And so it's an estimate. Now that's more of a rate problem. Now how many, let's say, objects of a certain size would fit in the back of a semi-trailer or inside a vehicle or inside a nuclear submarine? I don't know. You could pick it and you just back your way into it. And yes, those tend to have a little more, but even so, it's about the logic and the assumptions. Because quite often we're asked to do something very quickly, and then you can test it and throw it away. That's the essence of being agile, isn't it? Doing something very inexpensively, and same for analyses. Don't spend hours and days and weeks. Do something very quickly, and you can test things. And then if it makes sense, then you go into detail and make it very specific. Like building a slide. You could spend hours on it and throw it away and your life's been wasted. Or you could sketch something out on a piece of paper with a pen. You kind of test it, and then you could spend some time on it.